Okay, House of Normandy. Quick little game like this deserves a quick little review, I think. We'll see if I can manage that, though. It's a little outside my normal scope. I can give you it real quick. I mean, it's a nice, down and dirty, chuck some dice, get to do some random stuff with a medieval flavor to it. In terms of historical accuracy, there's nothing glaringly horrible about it. Everything that happens, you can kind of do a little hand waving, not a lot, and say, yeah, it kind of makes sense because of this. As a game, I think it's fine. The reason I bought this one was it came with 4 battles. Playing 4 of them in a row, more or less. Yeah, I played some opposed stuff as well in between, but playing 4 of these in a row, I felt like I had my fill of it. I don't think that I'm going to hunt down other games of the series. There may be some significant differences to some of the scenario-based stuff in some, to some of the unit qualities, etc. But I don't feel like it's going to be enough to change the system enough. And here's the big thing. A game like this isn't going to give you the kind of, storyline that I want from the games that I like to play, where I'm seeing enough detail to really kind of see what's going on. It's not going to give me the grounds to really criticize it on a historical basis, because it is really kind of light enough. Honestly, that may be absolutely appropriate for most medieval and ancient games, simply because our understanding of how well these weapon systems worked, how well, what the tactics were even used in them. Sometimes there's wildly disparaging claims for the same battle as to how troops were dispositioned and how they approached and everything. There's still arguments about how the checkerboard for the Romans works, There's a lot of big questions in play when you start getting to anything really before the big battle manuals start coming out in the Renaissance, at the very least, and maybe anything before 7 Years' War, where there's really detailed records. You even have battles after that where we're not absolutely sure what was where and how it was fought precisely. So, it's only the modern era where we have absolutely good details on forces, and we can really kind of analyze that data and try to crack it and come up with things, because, American Civil War, not that this is anywhere near that accurate, but in terms of the era, the information available for the era, the American Civil War stuff, we don't know what the actual strength of these units was. We can make estimates on it. Once you get to World War II, you have a little bit more of the rosters of who's present and who's not, and what percentage of the force actually was there. Yeah. The further back you go, the more foggy it gets, and maybe it's perfectly appropriate to say, we can't really model that. To me, that's a bit of a cop-out. I'm not, criticizing doing that. It's just, I don't think that you can say that there's nothing of value that you can say by going into more detail and presenting a model that you think is believable and has more information present in it. But for this one, you're really not looking at something that you're going to be able to deeply study the history. That said, it's just the kind of game that you would slap down. You're playing, say, an OCS game on 4 tables or whatever, and you know what? You got an hour between your chances to do anything, and you set this up with you and somebody else on your side, and you chuck some dice and have a little bit of fun in between. Or, as a light game, I look at it as an equivalent to something like Awful Green Things, or I guess maybe Ogre, but I never really enjoyed that. I definitely enjoy this more than Ogre. Maybe a small squad leader scenario or something like that. Something where you don't really have to worry too much, and the turns will go quickly enough that you can fit it in between other things. A filler game. Not in today's terms, but in my terms. In terms of the actual systems for it, I guess the thing that excited me the most was the concept of the command ships. And I was expecting something more like a musket and pike type game where I pick a command, or Hastings 1066, where I pick a command and then I have trouble getting out of it. Or where maybe I can't get into it easily. However you want to put it, where what I want to express as the overall commander isn't necessarily there. What these are instead is simply a restriction on what things I can do at any given time. They don't really, they don't indicate any kind of momentum aspect of what the units are doing. A little bit of weirdness with the integration of the combat class and the unit type. The unit type is kind of like, it gives you one modifier, and it all kind of boils down to one thing, basically. And the combat class gives you which row that you fight on. And there's sort of a balance between the two. You can kind of look at a -1 and it's about equivalent to a difference in a combat class. It's not exactly that, but it feels sort of that way. It's probably a little bit off from that, but it's just really a way to balance those forces and get some valuation from them. But you see some weird things like high quality levy units in one scenario, which seems really weird. Like, they're not really bad at killing things, but they're a little easier to kill than everything else. The only thing that affects how easy something to kill is not its combat class, but its type. And that's not a big modifier. So if you can get numbers on a more powerful type, you can overcome whatever disadvantage you have on it. On the other hand, if you can't get numbers on that more powerful type, you're going at a disadvantage, but it might be worth taking a crapshoot on. Components. I had some issues where maybe some of the rules didn't immediately gel together terribly well, but it's such a simple game that you're not going to have too much trouble with them. And if you do screw something up, it's not that big a deal either. It's kind of a shits and giggles type of thing, and it probably will still give you a plausible results. Likewise, if you forget whose turn it is or something and do someone else's turn, it's probably not that horrible a deal. It may determine the victory in the game. The actual scenarios, you got a nice historical description there. It didn't really help me too much in my prequels to the games and my vision of what's going on, because I kind of like the description of the battle itself to be, in the scenario part with the battle, and instead I'm having to page back a couple of times. And it ends up, I read through it, and then it's kind of gone because I read that whole section before I went. It's not a big deal. Anybody reasonable could cope with it. I'm just not necessarily all that reasonable. Full color printing might be a waste of full color printing. I don't know how much extra it costs to get full color, but most of it's black and white. You've got like a little bit of color in it. I don't know, maybe, they're doing separate pages and saying some of these will be printed in black and white, some in color, and that'll change the price. But for the most part, you could have done this all in black and white, for whatever that mattered. The counters are awfully nice, actually. I like the laser cut counters. They're nice and thick. There's no stacking, so it's not a big deal that you have these super thick counters, just pretty much one per, well, almost certainly one per hex. There's some markers that might be played otherwise. A little bit of trouble discerning some of the colors under bad lighting with bad eyes, but the only thing that I'm a little weird about with that, in one of the scenarios, you had like red, pink, and orange, and one of the three was on one side and the others were on another. I found that kind of a little disconcerting. I don't think it's a big deal, and it's a way to deal with giving you several battles with very few counters, really. The maps, I'm not sure what to say about these. I don't find this attractive with the broken hexes. The coloration, hey, I mean, this one there's nothing to discern. This one, most of what there is to discern, there's a setup region, fine. There's some marsh here, that's not really a problem, although it's not terribly attractive to me. And then there's this highland, which isn't well defined. In the rules, there seems to be some sort of barrier here or something, but I think this slope is just the same. I don't think there's a differentiation in the slope. There's no map key or anything like that. I didn't find them appealing. but they weren't, you know, I would have rather a blank map, honestly, for the most part, an old SPI style map coloration for that. But it wasn't, you know, it's not horrible. It's not like, I don't know, like the old CWB maps with their oranges and stuff and that 80s era stuff. It's just, I could definitely go with something better. Something a little more muted in certain ways. There's a certain gloss factor and everything coming off of it. Comes with an 8-sided die. It always makes me happy when games use a weird die. I don't know why. Some sort of twisted reason. Overall, I'm glad I got one. I don't think I'll look for any others in the series. This one's particularly attractive because it's 4 smaller battles. I don't really feel like, I don't know if the others, which go for about the same, like to me this is a magazine game with 4 scenarios. I don't know if any of the others are larger because they're covering a bigger battle or something. Maybe more. Maybe they used the 2 map sheets and all these counters at once. A lot of these used all the counters though, so I don't. A little battery misfunction there. A lot of the scenarios here use almost a large portion of the counter mix, so I don't feel like a game that say sells for the same price but has 1 battle in it is going to be all that much bigger, or could be all that much bigger if they're trying to hit a certain price point for the components that they're giving you. To me, and I'm probably just a cheap old bastard, but that $30 price point or whatever for what I feel is a magazine game, yeah, that's the price that the magazine games go for do now. But you do get the magazine with them. That's got to be worth at least $5 or something. This, you get a box, maybe that's worth the same $5. It just seems like too much. Of course, I was brought up in the days when the magazine games that came by subscription were what, $2.50 for my S&T subscriptions, and I'm sure they were less before that. Ever since that, you know, and boxed games went for 10 or $12. So you're looking at like 4 times the price of a subscription game for a boxed game. Well, and some of those boxed games that went for 10 or $12 still had the same amount of components, but they may have had hard maps. For the SPI ones, they probably had more counters than a magazine game did. May have had multiple maps, so like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that fits into this. I would say the boxed games that were 4 or 5 times the price had about twice the components probably in feel overall. They had a little less restriction on them. Nowadays, you know, you're looking at the difference between what I call a magazine and a full game at about twice the price for difference, and that's just tougher for me to accept because the magazine games to me have almost a not a throwaway quality to them, but I'll play this once or twice and I'm good with it. My boxed games, although some of my old magazine games got a lot of plays out of them, and some of my boxed games didn't get as many, it's just more excusable to me. And this kind of fits into that. I'm not saying I'll never play it again. It may actually get more play than, you know, some of my box stuff will, simply because, yeah, I can get this done in an hour or two. One of the scenarios, I can play it on a tiny tabletop at the game store, you know, with the clerk while he's ringing people out and stuff like that, without it being that big a deal. Whereas a lot of other games may require a little bit more investment, and I'm more likely to be playing a 2-player game in that circumstance, or with my wife, who will get antsy with anything that takes more than, you know, the 2 hours or whatever this might take maximum. So, you know, what do you aim for? What do you want? What do you need in your life? I think this fits its niche rather well, and I had a lot of fun with, say, the first 2, and then kind of wished that I was still having fun playing the others, but I also kind of wished that I wasn't in a situation where I feel like, yeah, I gotta play them all, you know, which is just how I am with the videos. Sure, there are games where I haven't played them all, but something with 4 small scenarios, I'm gonna get this done if I have any enjoyment at all out of it. I think I would have been better to space it out, that's all. But yeah, it's a cool system. Nothing terribly wrong with it. Nothing that is incredibly compelling either. The things that are nice about it from my standpoint are, other than how light and small it is, which is kind of cool, that it doesn't have any real glaring historical inaccuracies, but also the luck factor. It's got a fair amount of luck. It's not a game, I felt like Ancient Battles Deluxe, which is sort of on the same level in terms of small map, small scenarios, probably runs around the same price point, may give you more scenarios, but that was too thinky, and it would have less counters on the map. That was too thinky a game. You could pretty much clearly determine what was going to happen. You couldn't be absolutely certain, but you could clearly determine what was going to happen by your positioning. Here, there's still enough room on that D8 and on those tables that things can go fairly different from how you might expect or hope or fear that they would go. So, you know, in any case, there's some room to like, yep, I'll take my chances. And with me and my extreme die rolls that somebody pointed out, sometimes that's a big deal. Anyway, that's what I think of House of Normandy.